On a new sunny morning, a girl arrives at the Nagumo Detective Agency, stands in front of the building, and gives a small smile. Events begin with the sound of cheers and applause from some of the crowd. We hear a female reporter saying the junior detective has done it again, meaning that this detective managed to solve an old case the police had failed to solve. We see two police officers escorting a suspect into a police car, and everyone gets into the car and leaves the scene. Then, and at the same moment, we see a group of men and women gathering around a young detective. The reporter asks him for his opinion on the case. The young detective stands, turns to her, looks into the camera with a wink, and says the case wasn't exciting enough, then jokes, "Just kidding." Suddenly, we hear a phone ringing in the background. This wakes the detective up in a panic from his sleep. It turns out everything leading up to this was just a dream, recalling his youth. Now he's visibly older than before. This is his painful present. He answers the phone on his desk, saying, "This is the Nagumo Detective Agency." We find out that this is Keiichiro Nagumo, who was a famous detective in his youth, but over time has begun losing his knack for solving cases. The caller is his landlord, demanding the overdue rent. Nagumo asks him to be patient for a few days, and apologizes, thinking to himself he's only late by one day, but this damn landlord keeps chasing him. In the past, this landlord used to have a lot of respect for Nagumo. Nagumo gets up from his chair and heads to the door of his office. All of a sudden, he feels a sharp pain in his back and collapses to the floor. Still, he forces himself to get up. He has a surveillance job he needs to go to, and it's been a really long time since his last case. He has to be fully focused. He can't afford any mistakes now. Nagumo starts crawling on his stomach with his hands, motivating himself to get up. He reaches out to open the door just then. The girl we saw at the start of the episode opens it, standing there in her high school uniform. Nagumo looks at her, but his gaze isn't innocent, it's sly. The girl notices his sly look and gets furious. She pulls out something like a baseball bat and swings it in his face, warning him not to look at her that way. Nagumo insists he didn't look at her like that on purpose, but she doesn't believe him. He yells at her, "Who are you anyway?" If she's a client, he's sorry, but he's too busy at the moment to help. She replies that she came to him because she found this, and she pulls out a red box with a face on it. The girl seems confused, then starts searching and pulling out tons of things she was carrying, leaving Nagumo surprised at how much stuff she has with her. She says it looks like she forgot the thing she was looking for, but suddenly remembers she put it behind her neck. She takes out a sheet of paper and hands it to Nagumo. He reads Ite's the flyer he made when he was short on staff at the agency. The girl coughs and says she's here to apply for a job at his agency, but Nagumo refuses to hire her. She yells, objecting to his rejection, and the noise annoys him. He asks how a high school girl could be a detective, and complains about her clothes, saying she looks flashy. She snaps back, "That's not true," and points out his way of thinking is outdated and gross, but Nagumo doesn't care. The girl pleads that working alone is too hard for him, and he really needs help. Nagumo pulls out a pack of cigarettes, lights one, and looks at her, saying being a detective is tough work. You need to be steady, not afraid, never give in to temptation. It takes real talent. He looks at her again, and tells her it's not a job for a girl like her. Then he gives her the same sly look as before. The girl notices, gets angry, screams at him to stop looking at her that way, and pulls out a spear, hitting Nagumo with it. He apologizes. The girl asks why he tries to take advantage every time, giving her that sly look. Nagumo denies it again, saying that's not the case. She warns him, telling him maybe it's not like that, but she knows karate and if he tries anything stupid, he'll lose his head. Nagumo is surprised and asks why she wants to be a detective's assistant when there are lots of part-time jobs. The girl is surprised by Nagumo's question, smiles, and replies she wants to be a detective. Nagumo mutters if that's what someone says while carrying a spear. The girl explains she has worked hard ever since she was young to become a detective one day. She even trained herself to carry all this stuff with her. Nagumo objects, saying carrying things isn't much of a skill, but the girl is sure she'll be useful, and begs him to hire her. Barely getting the words out, Nagumo suddenly gets whacked in the nose by the girl, who says there's no need to discuss it. He grabs his nose, which is bleeding, and stands there frustrated. The girl says she's an ambitious detective and guesses what Nagumo was about to say. She puts her hand on her chin, thinking. Nagumo asks if she can really do it. She looks at him, reassures him that she can, and says she watched all the Furuhara episodes just yesterday back to back. She puts a finger to her forehead, thinking. Nagumo tells her this can't possibly work. She then gives him a sly look, saying that lately he's barely had any cases, which is why he's broke and can't afford to hire anyone. Nagumo is shocked by how accurate she is, but ignores her and tells her to go bother someone else, which surprises her. Then we see Nagumo at the station, holding a photo of a woman named Takako, probably around 27 years old. She married the client who hired Nagumo about 2 years ago, but the suspicion is that Takako is having secret meetings during her work hours, which is why Nagumo suspects her. As Nagumo observes her, Takako moves, and he starts following her. Then we see Nagumo watching her as she walks in the opposite direction, thinking she's going to meet a man. We watch him cautiously follow her as she enters a cafe. He decides to go in after her, but is surprised to find it's a fancy cafe. He tells himself, how can a middle-aged man like him enter such a luxurious cafe alone? And decides he'll watch Takako from outside. Suddenly, the young girl appears and grabs his arm. You'll definitely be embarrassed if you go into this cafe alone. I suggest I go in with you as your younger friend. Nagumo looks at her and is forced to agree. When Nagumo and the girl enter the cafe, the waitress asks them what they'd like to order. Nagumo looks at the menu but can't read it. Here, the little girl steps in and orders a strange drink from the waitress. Nagumo shouts, "That's too much." We see them sitting at a table near Takako. Nagumo looks at his drink and says he has sensitive teeth. The girl asks him what that means, and he replies it doesn't matter, then asks her why she doesn't look for another detective agency that's hiring. The girl replies that his office is the closest one to her home. Here, Nagumo tells the girl he's been a detective for 20 years, and being a detective isn't easy. The girl points out he's here to watch this woman, meaning Takako. Nagumo confirms it. The girl asks if it's about a romantic relationship, and he says yes, explaining he's watching her closely because he expects her to meet someone important. The girl is shocked by his obvious surveillance method. How can a skilled detective watch someone so clearly? This way, they'll be found out. Nagumo explains that he's getting old and his eyesight is poor, so what's he supposed to do? The girl yells at him and advises him to wear glasses. Here, Takako hears them and looks at them. At that moment, the little girl realizes this and tells Nagumo that the woman suspects them. To avoid suspicion, the girl takes a piece of ice cream and puts it in Nagumo's mouth like lovers, but Nagumo protests that his teeth are sensitive. The girl insists so they can avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, we see Takako looking at them and muttering that if they're lovers, the age difference between them is too big. Here, the girl looks at Takako and realizes her plan worked. Nagumo tells her not to worry too much, because Takako won't be able to figure them out that easily. The girl looks angrily at Nagumo and tells him that if it weren't for her, he'd be dead by now. Nagumo is surprised by her words and asks her why. The girl continues, explaining that these days, with just a small smartphone, photos can be sent all over the world, so people are more careful than before, and are afraid of anyone watching them. Nagumo looks at her then and asks her what a smartphone is. The girl takes out her own phone and shows it to him, explaining that this is a smartphone, and asks him what he thought it was. Nagumo replies that he thought it was a hand mirror. The girl yells at him and tells him that if he really considers himself a detective, he's old-fashioned. Nagumo takes the phone, looks at it, and mutters that times have changed. The girl continues, telling him she was watching Nagumo as he watched this woman, and explains that he's still chasing and watching people with food in his hand, which is very old-fashioned. Nagumo is surprised that the girl was following him, and asks her if she's not embarrassed to follow a middle-aged man. Nagumo doesn't know what high school is. The girl tells him she now realizes why he doesn't have many cases, because he's lost his touch. Nagumo agrees with her, and tells her that he has indeed lost his touch, and his intuition has weakened, but all he knows are the old methods that once brought him glory and earned him the title of the Great Detective. The girl here believes Nagumo. Meanwhile, we see someone appear and stand next to Takako, start talking to her, then hug her. Here, Nagumo shouts that he was right. Proving infidelity is easier than proving innocence. The girl suggests he take pictures of them. Nagumo takes out a camera that's obvious to everyone, which angers the girl who tells him it's too obvious. Nagumo explains that's all he has and he doesn't know what to do. Takako and the man with her notice them then. The girl acts quickly, takes out her phone, and snaps a selfie with Nagumo. But when they go to the office, we see that the photo shows Takako and the man with her in the background. The man who hired Nagumo is shocked by his wife's infidelity. Then we see the man pay Nagumo and leave. The girl asks Nagumo if she can be his assistant, but Nagumo refuses. The girl gets angry and explains she helped him a lot. Nagumo tells her that's true, and he'll give her a voucher to visit his agency anytime, explaining that it's too early for her to be his assistant. At that moment, the girl snatches Nagumo's jacket and tells him that's payment for the day. Nagumo asks the girl how she feels about her first job. The girl replies that it lacks some excitement. Nagumo is surprised by her answer. The girl explains she's just joking. Nagumo is even more surprised and asks if she knows him. The girl leaves him and runs off. Nagumo calls out to her and tells her he doesn't know her name. The girl looks at him and tells him her name is Mashiro. Nagumo advises her to be careful as she walks her way. Suddenly, he feels a pain in his back again and falls to the ground. Mashiro comes back to him and tells him that he's the one who needs to be careful as he walks. One morning in Nagumo's office, we see Nagumo and Mashiro shouting, holding pictures of a cat, and saying, "No, not this cat." In front of them, a woman tells them it's a different cat. Nagumo already notices this, looks at Mashiro, and asks her what they should do with this cat. Mashiro suggests that this cat become the agency's cat, Cerberus. Nagumo looks at Mashiro, who has decided to keep the cat, and she approaches the cat's face, which spits at her. Mashiro gets very angry and starts scolding the cat. Meanwhile, We see the woman in front of them asking about her request. After that, we see a poster with "Any job accepted" written on it. Mashiro asks Nagumo for his opinion on it and explains that with this poster, clients will flock to them. Nagumo looks at the poster, then grabs it and tears it up. Mashiro shouts at him and wants to understand why he did that. Nagumo looks at her and asks her what she meant by "any job accepted," and continues that they are detectives who don't know everything and have their pride as detectives. Mashiro looks at him and reminds him that he was looking for a lost cat. Nagumo explains to her that finding a lost cat is a detective's job. Mashiro replies that being a detective these days is very hard to make a living, and they have to accept all kinds of jobs, like catching a bear that escaped into the city and things like that. Nagumo explains he doesn't want to risk his life and yells at her, asking how it makes sense to attract clients with this poster, and tells her to get rid of it. Mashiro explains to him that she distributed 500 posters around the city. Nagumo is shocked by her. He asked her to find out how much it would cost to make 500 copies and looked at the cat, asking if it wanted some food, but was startled when he noticed the cat had a fly in its mouth. Suddenly, the cat started chasing Nagumo, who was scared of it. At that moment, Mashiro grabbed the cat, took the bug from its mouth, and advised it not to eat insects. Nagumo yelled at her and asked how she could touch a bug with her hands. Mashiro looked at him and told him insects are nothing. Then, Mashiro realized that Nagumo was afraid of insects, so she started to get closer to him, suddenly ran after him while holding the bug, and Nagumo ran away scared. Suddenly, Nagumo turned towards Mashiro, grabbed her angrily, and threw her out the window, telling her to remove the 500 posters from around the city. Behind him appeared a strange little girl, who called the police to report that a high school girl had been killed. Nagumo shouted at her, saying it was all a misunderstanding. After that, Nagumo explained to the strange girl that Mashiro really didn't mind falling from the 5th floor. Then he asked her why she was there. The girl explained that she'd seen the poster saying he accepted any job, so she had come to him. Nagumo was surprised that the poster had worked. The girl said she had a beehive in her house. Nagumo looked at her and asked her to keep what he was about to say a secret, telling her he was very scared of insects and couldn't do anything about it, but there was a solution: he would call Mashiro to help, since she didn't have a problem with bugs. He grabbed his phone but asked the girl how the phone worked. The girl was confused. Meanwhile, Mashiro was removing the posters when Nagumo called and told her they'd received an extermination request. Mashiro was really happy, and Nagumo told her to go alone. She asked for the address, so Nagumo asked the girl, got the address, and passed it on to Mashiro, who went there. Nagumo asked her if she could see the nest. Mashiro was standing in front of a Yakuza group's building and answered yes, telling him it was a huge pest nest. Nagumo told her to completely wipe out the nest. Mashiro shouted, asking how he could talk about that so casually, so Nagumo asked why she was being so timid now and said he was counting on her. Mashiro promised she'd do her best. Mashiro began to talk to herself, saying that she had trained a lot, watched all the action movies, and that now she was basically a secret agent. At that moment, Nagumo asked her if she was ready. She replied yes. Meanwhile, Nagumo was reading a book about pest extermination in his office and talking to Mashiro on the phone. He advised her to get as close to the nest as possible and to check for any enemies at the entrance. At that moment, Mashiro walked into an office full of people who wondered who the girl was. Nagumo advised her to block the entrance, and Mashiro did just that. One of them walked over to Mashiro, laughed in her face, and asked what she was doing there. Nagumo told her that once she'd blocked the entrance, she should spray the insecticide. That's when Mashiro sprayed the insecticide in the man's face. The rest of the guys panicked and wondered if it was tear gas and prepared to fight her. While this was happening, Nagumo was still on the phone with Mashiro, telling her that spraying the insecticide would make everyone go crazy and advised her to be careful. The people attacked Mashiro, but she dodged their hits and fought back. Nagumo warned her to watch out for insect stings. Then, one guy pointed a gun at her and said he'd turn her into a beehive. Nagumo was shocked to hear a voice that sounded like his and heard gunshots over the line. Mashiro hid from the gunfire, getting ready to attack, then pulled out a strange weapon and fired back at them. Nagumo was amazed. He had no idea what was happening to Mashiro. In the end, Mashiro beat everyone except one guy, who was getting ready to attack her. When Mashiro dropped her weapon, he lunged, but suddenly he saw Mashiro as a warrior, and behind her was a monster. The man got scared, fell to the ground in front of Mashiro, apologized to her, and promised he'd leave the Yakuza for good. Mashiro then told Nagumo the job was done, just as he'd expected. The girl said she was very happy. Nagumo asked Mashiro if she knew what kind it was. Mashiro didn't understand, so Nagumo told her to describe what she saw. Mashiro looked at the man in front of her and told Nagumo they had long legs. Nagumo was surprised and asked if it could be hornets. Later, in Nagumo's office, he and Mashiro watched the news, which reported that a Yakuza group had been taken down by a mysterious person. Stunned, Nagumo asked if that was her. She said yes. Nagumo screamed at her, asking how exterminating a beehive turned into destroying a Yakuza gang. Mashiro said she'd made a mistake and explained that she'd brought someone else with her. That person turned out to be the last member of the Yakuza group whom Mashiro had spared. His name was Nezu. Nezu said he was at Nagumo's service for anything he needed. Nagumo asked him to get some coffee. Mashiro was happy that their office had gained another member. Then the girl appeared behind them and said, "What about my request?" Nagumo and Mashiro are sitting watching a program on TV. Suddenly, they see something that scares them, and they start screaming. Mashiro goes to get salt to purify the place from evil spirits. Nagumo advises her not to watch such programs. In the meantime, Mashiro jumps up and throws the entire bag of salt, as is, at the TV screen, breaking it. Nagumo says, "You would have been better off throwing the salt without the bag." Mashiro is afraid of dark places and ghosts. She asks Nagumo if these things bother him. Nagumo answers no. Mashiro is surprised by his response and says, "How is that?" Nagumo explains to her that there is no such thing as ghosts. Mashiro asks him if he can walk alone at night in cemeteries. He says to her, "No problem," and continues that ghosts and Santa Claus share the same roots, because they are the product of children's imaginations. He continues that Santa, ghosts, and imaginary childhood friends are all illusions. Mashiro thinks that if Nagumo dies, he will turn into a spiteful trapped spirit. At that moment, they hear the doorbell. Mashiro opens the door to see Hayashi Ida, who says to Mashiro that she really works at a detective agency. Mashiro is surprised. Nagumo understands that Hayashi Ida is Mashiro's classmate. Mashiro explains that she hasn't seen him in a while. Hayashi Ida replies yes, because she doesn't come to class often. Mashiro smiles and explains that she is keeping up with her attendance. Mashiro gets flustered and asks Hayashi Ida what his horoscope is for today. Nagumo is surprised and says to himself that they aren't close friends. Hayashi Ida explains that he came to ask for a favor. Mashiro says to him, "You're the one asking for the favor?" Hayashi Ida looks at them and explains that there is a ghost that keeps appearing around his house. Mashiro stutters here and gets scared. Hayashi Ida continues that every night at midnight, he feels something outside. So, he bought a security camera to monitor this thing, and he saw static on the camera, and suddenly a ghost of a girl appeared. He continues that he went outside to make sure of what he saw, but the camera showed static again, and the thing he saw disappeared. Nagumo explains that this could be a silly prank or a stalker, and continues his speech by stating that there could be many explanations for this, so he and Mashiro will investigate it. He looks at Mashiro, who is trembling with fear, and imagines her as a crazy rural priestess. Suddenly, Mashiro replies and says that she cannot do this task. Here, Nagumo asks her, "Does a detective choose her clients based on her mood?" He continues that he won't say that taking the easy way out is wrong, but if she chooses this path, he will never catch up to her. Mashiro looks at him in amazement, and we see the cat objecting and words appear on the cat's behalf that Nagumo made Mashiro take on the extermination mission alone. Mashiro gets excited after that. Hayashi Ida asks Mashiro if she is sure that she will be okay. Suddenly, Mashiro tries to remember her trainer's advice, and then we see her asking the trainer how to defeat a ghost. The trainer laughs and advises her to hit it in the nose. Mashiro says that he made that up. The trainer replies that the weak point of any creature is its nose. Mashiro asks him if it doesn't work. The trainer replies that if it doesn't work, you must target the knees. Suddenly, we see Mashiro saying that she is ready. We hear Nagumo asking her, "Who is your trainer?" After that, Mashiro asks Hayashi Ida that she didn't know that he lived alone, and she sees his house is clean. Nagumo asks Hayashi Ida, "Won't you be able to see the ghost if you are outside?" Hayashi Ida explains to him that the ghost doesn't appear when people are around, Nagumo thinks. At this moment, Mashiro looks at the laptop and says, "Is this connected to the security camera?" And suddenly she screams that she sees something, and they approach her to see what is appearing. Suddenly, they see an old man passing in front of the camera, and Mashiro says, "Just an old man." Nagumo shouts at her and says, "Is this old man known?" We hear Mashiro saying that he is the famous old man who has been appearing lately. How doesn't Nagumo know him? And he's an old man like him. At the same moment, we see Hayashi Ida confused and scared, and suddenly he screams and says, "The static appeared." Suddenly, we see the ghost girl screaming, and then Mashiro and Hayashi Ida scream together, and Mashiro explains that this is the scariest thing she has ever seen, and Nagumo asks her to go. Mashiro is amazed. Nagumo continues, "It seems like it disappears quickly, and I need your speed to know what it is." Here, we see Mashiro angry and forced to go, and suddenly she runs quickly and goes out of the house door while saying to Nagumo that he shouldn't invite her to a barbecue later. In the meantime, Hayashi Ida says that the static came back again, and Nagumo and Hayashi Ida look at the security camera, and they see that the ghost disappeared, and Mashiro appears, and the old man passes by her and gives her food, and we hear Hayashi Ida saying that she is eating the food, and Nagumo says that she shouldn't accept food from people like this old man. The next day, we see Mashiro preparing herself and saying that today is the day she will catch the ghost, and the ghost appears on the surveillance screen, and Nagumo asks her to go chase it, and Mashiro goes quickly, and we see Mashiro outside outside screaming that the ghost disappeared. On the 5th day, we see Nagumo saying that it's there, and we see Mashiro running and jumping to catch the ghost. But the ghost also disappears, and Mashiro is disappointed. On the 7th day, Nagumo and Hayashida are sitting in front of the surveillance screen, and they watch Mashiro, who is vowing to the ghost that she will break its legs so that it can't run when she catches it. We see Nagumo explaining that Mashiro is getting faster every time, but it disappears before she reaches it, and that it never appears if they hide and wait for it. Hayashida replies to him and says that they are kind of stuck. Nagumo looks at him and says to him, "You seem very satisfied, considering everything." Hayashida gets flustered here and denies it. Nagumo warns him that the static appeared. Suddenly, Nagumo calls Mashiro and asks her to go this time through the window. Hayashida gets flustered, and Mashiro jumps through the glass window and explains that the ghost doesn't expect this time that she will take a shortcut. Hayashida is surprised. Nagumo notices that Mashiro is supposed to appear in front of the camera, but he only sees the ghost, and looks at Hayashida and asks him, "What is this?" Hayashida answers that he has no idea. Nagumo explains that Hayashida is that ghost. Hayashida is surprised here and says to him, "I'm here?" Nagumo explains that Hayashida wore the ghost's clothes before, and recorded these scenes, and was replaying the original image before Mashiro arrived, so that they wouldn't discover that it was a recording. Hayashida is agitated and says to him, "Where is your proof?" Nagumo asks him not to get upset, and explains to him that the moment they look at the camera, he was controlling the remote control in his pocket, and this is enough evidence. Hayashida asks him when he discovered his trick. Nagumo answers from the first time. The moment the ghost disappeared, the old man's light was visible. Hayashida asks him why he pretended not to know. Nagumo explains that he wanted to know the reason and discovered it in the previous days. And the reason is that he is impressed with Mashiro, and noticed his enjoyment of spending time with her, and from his facial expressions, ghosts were the last thing on his mind. So he created this story to have a reason to see her, and asked him if he was right. Hayashida says no. Nagumo continues that Nagumo did it before, that he borrowed an MD player from a girl, and then told her that he lost it, so that she would go with him to his room and look for it. But he discovers after that she also stole it, and he was shocked. Hayashida collapses here, and admits that Nagumo is right, and that he actually created this story for Mashiro's sake, and begs him to forgive him while crying. Nagumo asks him if he knows Sherlock Holmes. Hayashida answers yes. Nagumo continues that in one of the books, and he was thinking, and said that he doesn't remember what came in one of the books. Nagumo continues that Hayashida should stop stalling, and tell Mashiro about his feelings for her, and that he can pay his fees when he can. At this moment, Mashiro enters on them, and Nagumo explains to her that Hayashida wants to tell her something. But they are surprised that Mashiro has caught a real ghost, and Nagumo and Hayashida panic, and Mashiro advises them to bring a bag of salt immediately. In the office, we see Mashiro unable to find her pudding in the fridge, so she goes to Nizukin, who is sweating, and asks him if he ate the pudding. He denies it, looking flustered, but suddenly they hear on the news that Detective Nagumo has been arrested for stealing underwear. Mashiro doesn't believe it. She tells him to look for another lie, but she is shocked when she sees on the news a picture of Nagumo, who was arrested for stealing underwear. At the police station, we hear someone say, "You've grown up, Keiichiro." Nagumo replies, "You've also become old, Inspector Mimisaka." The inspector asks him to address him as he used to. He remembers that he and Nagumo used to be brilliant detective partners in high school, but now one is a humble government employee and the other is a thief of underwear. Nagumo angrily tells him he's not the culprit. Mimisaka responds that he doesn't think he is the thief. Nagumo asks if he can go home, but Mimisaka won't allow it because he has evidence and pulls out an SD card. Nagumo asks what it is. Mimisaka says it's an SD card containing footage recorded by one of the victims. Nagumo asks what an SD card is. Mimisaka takes him to explain what's happening in the footage, but he breaks the card while inserting it into the computer and looks at Nagumo saying, "I didn't do anything." 10 minutes later, he shows him a picture of Nagumo stealing underwear. Nagumo is shocked and admits, "That's me." Mimisaka approaches him and explains that the case is closed now, but Nagumo turns to him, saying that there's something wrong with the picture. The person who resembles him is meant to look at the camera. Based on the victim's claims that the thief is a professional, would a professional make such a mistake? He continues, saying someone wants to frame him, but Mimisaka isn't convinced. He asks if he has any evidence. Nagumo replies that he will have the evidence, and remembers Mashiro, and adds that her help will find the evidence. Meanwhile, we see Mashiro holding a fishing rod with underwear at the end, and asking Nizukin what this is. He replies that it's part of his plan to catch the underwear thief. He says he will carry the rod around the city to catch the thief. He asks her if this is how he should be to be a detective. Mashiro looks at him and says there are 2 left. Nezuko jumps back, asking her to clarify what she means. After that, we see Mashiro lay out a map, showing the locations where the thief stole underwear. Nezuko notices that these locations are around their office. Mashiro responds that Nagumo was arrested while not in the act, and realizes there is video evidence. She clarifies that the thief looks exactly like Nagumo, and that the thief wanted to make it seem like Nagumo is the culprit. Nezuko smiles because he sees that Mashiro resembles detectives. Mashiro is happy about that and asks him if he doesn't notice anything strange on the map. Nezuko asks what it is. She replies that if she draws lines connecting the locations, they form the constellation Ursa Major. Nezuko is surprised and says it doesn't look like that. She asks him how it's not. It looks exactly like Ursa Major. He responds that it looks like Uzbekistan, and continues that if it resembles Ursa Major, what does that mean? Mashiro clarifies that they must arrest anyone wearing Ursa Major costumes. Nezuko replies that this is ridiculous. At the police station, Mimisaka can't believe that Nagumo found a reliable assistant. Nagumo clarifies that he doesn't call her reliable. We see Nezuko annoyed with Mashiro, asking her why she is drying her underwear at his house. Mashiro clarifies that if she used the office, it would make the thief suspicious, and adds that people in the area have started drying their clothes inside because of the thief, and it ends up here. She explains that the thief focuses on clothes that are white. While she's talking, Nezuko says Nagumo got released. Mashiro looks outside and tells him that she set a trap for the thief to come here, but she's shocked to find out that it's not Nagumo but the thief, who looks just like him. The thief immediately runs away, and Nezuko chases after him. While running, he trips over an insect and falls down. Mashiro sees this, and swears that all the men in the office are useless. After that, we see Mashiro chasing the thief in the street. The thief looks at Mashiro and mocks her, but Mashiro replies that she will use her drone weapon to stop him. The thief stops, astonished, but Mashiro leaps at him, saying, "As if I have a drone, you fool." She knocks him down, and tells him she'll make an example of him to take down Nagumo. The thief asks her to calm down, and here, in a sneaky way, he manages to escape while she shouts in place. Nezuko comes and asks her if she caught the thief, but she gets angry and vows to crush him. We see Mimisaka finishing the investigation with Nagumo, and asking him if his assistant will save him. They hear noise outside and Mimisaka asks where it's coming from. At that moment, Mashiro opens the door and apologizes to Nagumo for being late. Nagumo turns to her and says, "You've taken your time." Mashiro smiles at him and clarifies that she caught the thief who looks exactly like, but she hit him so hard that they can't tell what he looks like. After that, we hear Mashiro say, "Stop right there, you arsonist," and we see someone running with Mashiro chasing after him and wondering about her incredible speed. Mashiro pulls out a soccer ball and kicks it towards the arsonist. The arsonist smiles as the ball misses him, mocking her, but suddenly the ball hits him. We hear Mashiro say that the pen is mightier than the sword. Nagumo replies that this phrase doesn't relate to anything. At the police station, Mimisaka praises Mashiro for her work, but she clarifies that there's no need for that. But the arsonist laughs, and Nagumo asks him what's making him laugh, and he says it's his art outside. They must go check parking lot number 1 next to the station, and he doesn't think they'll arrive on time. Nagumo asks Mashiro to go there quickly. He asks Mimisaka what he did. The arsonist replies that he made art, and continues asking if the girl can handle it, and we see Mashiro has arrived at the parking lot. We hear the person clarify that his art is provocative. Mashiro looks around the parking lot and sees a poster, and we hear Nagumo asking if she found anything. She clarifies that there's a monster hunting task posted, and she sees a box, asking what it is. Nagumo asks her to wait for backup and not touch anything. The arsonist responds that there's no time for backup. Mashiro has to open the box. We hear Nagumo ask her not to open it as it could be a bomb. Mashiro opens the box, and we find that it's a bomb. The arsonist gets angry at Nagumo for revealing the surprise. Nagumo apologizes to him. Mimisaka shouts at Nagumo for his negligence, and asks to prepare the bomb disposal team. Nagumo asks Mashiro to send him a picture of the bomb, and she sends it to him. Nagumo and Mimisaka look at the picture, and Nagumo yells at Mashiro for taking a selfie with the bomb, because he wants a picture of the bomb up close, but she sends him a personal photo instead. Nagumo gets angry, telling her to stop that. Here, Mashiro clarifies that there are 3 minutes left until the bomb explodes. Nagumo asks her to run away, but Mashiro refuses, saying if the bomb explodes, it will destroy the building. She continues that she will disarm it. Nagumo panics and tells her to stay away from it. Meanwhile, the arsonist laughs at them, but Nagumo grabs him and asks him to tell him how to stop the bomb. Mimisaka explains to Nagumo that he didn't tell him anything, and indeed the arsonist says that there's no way to disarm the bomb. Nagumo leaves him to fall and asks Mashiro about her plan. Mashiro explains that she saw how heroes disarm bombs in movies, and that if she can get through this, she will make a breakthrough, and if she fails, she she will make more than a breakthrough. Nagumo worries about what she said. She takes the bomb, mentioning a blue wire and a red wire, and that success always lies in cutting the red wire. After that, they hear the sound of an explosion, but Mashiro reassures them, saying it's her because she got scared. She asks what she should do now, because there's a tangle of wires. Nagumo urges her to run quickly, but she refuses, suggesting that she will take it to a remote place with no people. Mimisaka tells Nagumo that the bomb squad won't arrive in time. Mashiro runs while holding the bomb, and Mimisaka talks to her in the meantime. He tells her that there's an abandoned baseball field in the north, and continues that she should place the bomb inside the field. Mashiro runs, and only 1 minute is left, and she hasn't been able to place the bomb inside the field, so she has to kick it into the field. And indeed, she does that. But we see Nezukin inside the field doing his hobby of taking pictures. He looks through the camera and sees the bomb in front of him. The bomb explodes and blows up the field. We hear Mashiro asking if he can tell her how to get to the station, and Nagumo replies that this sentence doesn't relate to anything. At the Nagumo Detective Agency, we hear someone vowing that it's time for Nagumo to pay his debt, and we see the anger in his eyes. We see a stressed Nagumo looking at an overdue collection notice, and understand that he doesn't have the money to pay the rent. Mashiro overhears him, and offers to lend him some money. Nagumo looks at her and asks how much she has. Mashiro answers that she has 500 yen in her piggy bank. Nagumo feels disappointed. Suddenly, the person we saw at the beginning of the episode appears behind Mashiro, and asks if this is the Nagumo Detective Agency. Nagumo is startled by him. Mashiro yells at him, accusing him of being a thief, but the person denies being a thief. Mashiro then asks him how he got in when the door was locked. The person replies that he has his own special skills for opening doors. Mashiro is now certain he's a thief. The two argue. During this, Nagumo feels like his heart was about to stop because of this person. The person apologizes and says his name is Asunaro, a high school detective. He explains that when he sees a mystery or a case, his nature immediately compels him to investigate it. Mashiro angrily points out that opening doors and locks isn't a puzzle for him to solve. At this moment, Nagumo is surprised and asks Asunaro if he's really the great detective Asunaro, whom he sees often on TV. He adds that he's the best young detective in the spotlight right now. Asunaro replies that he has never reached Nagumo's level. Nagumo asks him what brought him here. Nagumo notices that Asunaro is spacing out. It becomes clear to us that he's thinking that 10 minutes have passed since he entered, and he hasn't been offered coffee. He wonders, what does this mean? Meanwhile, we hear Nagumo ask, where are our hospitality manners? Mashiro serves him coffee. We notice Asunaro thinking that most hosts serve coffee with milk and sugar on the side. He was served black coffee, even though he didn't ask for it that way. He wonders, what does this mean? Nagumo remarks that this boy is going to be a source of trouble for them. After that, Asunaro explains that he came for one reason. He asks Nagumo to hire him as his assistant. Nagumo is shocked. Mashiro gets angry and points out that he already has an assistant. Nagumo asks him why. As a great detective, he wants to work for him. Asunaro replies that Nagumo is the reason he is what he is today, because when he was a child, he used to read articles about him and how a young detective was able to overcome senior detectives with his intelligence and rise to the top. All the media was interested in him at that time. He entered this field to be like him, and now that he has become strong, he is ready to repay his debt. Nagumo appreciates his feelings, but doesn't have the money to hire him. Asunaro surprises him by replying that he will work for him for free. He explains that his own work is going well and he's now rich, and that he intends to pay him a tuition fee. Nagumo is surprised and asks him to clarify. At this moment, Mashiro shouts, demanding to be included in this conversation. She asks him if he shouldn't consult his first assistant, Mashiro, first. Here, Asunaro thinks and asks, a gorilla that wears clothes and talks? Mashiro makes it clear that this boy is making her angry. She continues that Asunaro has no logic and just barged into this place. We hear Nagumo add, without any warning too. Mashiro continues that desire isn't enough to be like this old man, referring to Nagumo. Asunaro asks her if she thinks his admiration for him is all he has to offer. He adds that he can be more useful to Nagumo than she is. Mashiro gets angry. We hear her reply that she's ready for a challenge. Asunaro accepts, but asks for another cup of coffee. We hear Mashiro say, coming right up. All of this was being watched by a silent Nagumo. We then see a girl who says she is the host of the event. We understand she is Kazumaki, Asunaro's assistant. She continues that they will compete in 3 main areas of detective work: intelligence, deduction skills, and endurance. She explains that whoever wins the first 2 areas will become Detective Nagumo's assistant. She asks if this is acceptable. Asunaro quickly replies, of course, no problem. Mashiro shouts here, pointing out that it's not fair for Asunaro's assistant to set this up. Kazumaki looks at her and says there's no need to worry because she hates Asunaro. We hear Asunaro say that hurts and that she's harsh. Kazumaki replies that she wants extra pay for this. Asunaro remarks that she talks with pride, but she's smitten with him. Mashiro asks her if that's true. We see her holding her nose, and Asunaro asks her to stop it. We hear Kazumaki say that the first round is in intelligence. We see Nagumo at this moment sitting and watching them. Kazumaki continues that each competitor will be given the same wire puzzle. The first one to solve it will win. She asks if they are ready. We see Asunaro and Mashiro with the puzzles. Ready. The competition begins. We see each of them trying to untangle the wires first. Kazumaki points out that Detective Asunaro is very fast. Asunaro laughs and says he's close to solving it. At that moment, he is shocked when he sees that Mashiro has already solved it. Asunaro screams when he notices that she cut the wire. Kazumaki announces that Mashiro has won. Asunaro is surprised and asks how she can allow that. Kazumaki explains that she said whoever solves it first would be the winner. Asunaro accuses Mashiro of being a cheater and refuses to accept this. We hear a quote that says, "Man is not willing to believe what he does not understand." Pascal. Asunaro gets angry at Mashiro, and the result is Mashiro's victory. Nagumo puts his hand on his face. We hear Kazumaki say that the second round will be in deduction skills. We see an encrypted phrase created by Kazumaki. She continues that the first one to figure out what is written will win. She tells them to get ready. The two start thinking. Nagumo asks, "Do we need to be outside for this?" Mashiro thinks about what's written and whether the first letter is in English or if they are drawings. At this moment, Asunaro declares that this is extremely easy. Mashiro is astonished. Asunaro continues that what's written is the word P. Kazumaki apologizes and declares Asunaro the winner. Mashiro gets angry and points out that it was too fast. She accuses Asunaro of knowing the answer beforehand. We hear a quote that says, "Geniuses are those who have studied 3, 4, or 5 times more than anyone else." Noguchi, and the result is now a tie. Asunaro asks Mashiro if she even knows the word pie. Mashiro gets very angry and accuses him of trying to start a fight with her. Kazumaki interrupts them, saying the final round is in endurance. She shows them a drawing. Kazumaki explains that it's called a stamp rally race. She explains that she has placed stamps in 3 locations around the park. The first one to return here will win. Asunaro provokes Mashiro by saying he'll help her find her next job. Mashiro gets angry. Kazumaki asks them if they are ready. She pulls out a starting pistol and fires it, but they collide with each other like sumo wrestlers. Kazumaki clarifies that if they don't take this seriously, she will leave. Then we see them running side by side, and Asunaro says to Mashiro, "How dare you collide with me like a sumo wrestler, you cowardly muscle girl." Mashiro retorts that he's the coward. Meanwhile, Kazumaki turns to Nagumo and expresses her sympathy that he's forced to put up with this nonsense. Nagumo tells her not to worry about it. Kazumaki says that Asunaro greatly admires him, and that all he talks about is him. Nagumo replies that Asunaro has strange taste. Kazumaki explains that Asunaro wants Nagumo to regain his former glory, and that his desire for that is what brought him this far. Meanwhile, Asunaro and Mashiro approach the first stamp location. Nagumo asks, "Is my sparkle dull now?" Kazumaki quickly apologizes here, but Nagumo was just joking with her. He adds that Asunaro reminds him of himself when he was young, and bets that he is enjoying this stage. Meanwhile, we see Asunaro and Mashiro approaching the third stamp location. Nagumo continues that Asunaro has no doubt that he can keep going like this, and that he is different from him because he has support. Because when he was his age, there was no one to support him except his partner, who would push him forward or hold him back when needed. He adds that he envies him, because talking to a partner of the same age as you seems easier. Kazumaki is surprised and repeats, "Of the same age." She adds that she still deserves to stick around for a while. Nagumo asks her if she said something. Kazumaki answers no. She asks Nagumo if Mashiro is his support now. Nagumo replies that he's not sure. Kazumaki smiles and says that they're a good pair. She asks him that if Asunaro wins, not to fire Mashiro. Nagumo looks at her and explains that no one can beat Mashiro in endurance. Kazumaki looks on and says that anything she would say to praise Asunaro, she regrets. We see that Asunaro is ahead of Mashiro, and he taunts her that she's about to lose the race. Mashiro feels her body getting heavy, and if she loses, she won't be able to stay with Nagumo. We see her throwing away everything that's weighing her down. Asunaro is surprised by the amount of stuff Mashiro was carrying. Kazumaki is also surprised. Nagumo explains that it's her storage technique. Mashiro has finally gotten rid of everything weighing her down, and suddenly she takes off at immense speed. Meanwhile, we see Mashiro's coach talking to her. He explains that she has trained well and endured all this harsh training. Mashiro asks him if she can become a detective. The coach answers, "Of course." Suddenly, we see Mashiro has won the race. Asunaro states that he lost, but will take her place next time. Mashiro replies, okay. Here, Asunaro thinks and wonders that in a situation like this, the other party should reply and say, you did great. He wonders, what does this mean? We hear Mashiro say that he is a very annoying person. Asunaro calls for Kazamaki so they can leave. Nagumo informs him that she has already left, because she said she had to receive a package. Suddenly, we see Asunaro running and calling Kazamaki's name. Nagumo says that he didn't do anything, but he feels exhausted. Mashiro asks him if he's okay with this, because if he had hired Asunaro, he would have been paid, and he would have been a better assistant than her. But at this moment, Nagumo interrupts her and asks her why she has become such a mature and sensitive person. He continues that if she brought him a lot more money than him, what's the problem? He asked her, can you do that? Mashiro looks at him and replies, yes. Nagumo is broke. Mashiro tells him that she can lend him some money. Asunaro appears again from behind Mashiro, and Mashiro is startled once more. She asks him what he's doing here. Asunaro replies that he's here for a job. Kazamaki interrupts him and explains that it's about the commotion last time, and she's given them a gift. Nagumo says there's no need for that. Asunaro points out that Kazamaki interrupted him, and that he's here to ask Nagumo to do a job for him, but no one paid attention to his words. Asunaro thinks, am I actually dead? Mashiro clarifies that she went too far with the joke. Nagumo asks Asunaro that he has a job for him. Why? Asunaro explains that a stalker is chasing him. Nagumo and Mashiro are surprised. Asunaro adds that he always feels someone is watching him, and whenever he chases this person, he can't catch them because they are very fast. Kazamaki explains that Asunaro is very popular and has extreme fans. Nagumo accepts the job because he wants some excitement. Later, on the street, Mashiro explains that the three-way chase is fun. Nagumo replies that it's not a game. Kazamaki notices Asunaro stopping. Nagumo notices Asunaro staring at a person wearing glasses, who he thinks is the stalker. Asunaro ponders that this person doesn't seem to train, yet they're wearing running headphones. What does this mean? Nagumo explains that this is a rude first impression. Kazamaki retorts that Asunaro thinks he should ask questions all the time, and Mashiro notices him stopping again. We see Asunaro thinking that a woman is filling her car with cat supplies, even though her husband has a dog's face. Nagumo wonders if he has to do this all the time. Mashiro states she can't live with him, and suddenly, we see a group of fangirls standing around Asunaro. Nagumo asks Mashiro if she noticed something. Mashiro asks him what it is. Nagumo replies that he noticed someone following him all the time, and we see a person wearing a mask, and Mashiro says he's suspicious. Nagumo clarifies that he is indeed suspicious, but not that person, but rather a second masked person. Mashiro responds that he is indeed a strange person. Nagumo asks Asunaro to calmly go to the place he will direct him to, and we see Asunaro walking with this person behind him. Suddenly, Asunaro confronts him and surprises him, calling him a fool and saying he's trapped, and asks him why he's following him. This person explains that he didn't mean to. Asunaro explains that the worst stalkers don't realize they're doing it. The person replies that he's not doing it and runs away. Asunaro smiles and says, didn't I tell you you're trapped? And Nagumo suddenly appears in front of him. Nagumo asks him, are you saying you're tougher than a bear? And explains that this was a long time ago, and adds that he previously asked him to get rid of a destructive bear. The stalker looks at him and runs away. Nagumo suddenly twists his joint in a strange way and falls to the ground, and yells at Mashiro to catch him, and Mashiro appears in front of the stalker in a strange way, and the stalker tricks her, making her look in the other direction towards a famous person Mashiro admires, and escapes from her. Nagumo wonders how this stalker knows the famous person Mashiro admires. He calls out to Kazamaki to chase him, and suddenly, she throws her clothes at him, and finally, they caught the stalker. Asunaro asks to see his face, and they are shocked when they see it's Nezo, and Mashiro asks him, why you? Nezo replies that he's not a stalker. Mashiro asks him, why did you run? Nezo answers that they seemed very serious, so he got scared and ran, and he points at Asunaro and says he is the stalker. Asunaro is surprised and wonders, who am I stalking? Nezo replies that he's stalking Nagumo, and adds that he saw him hovering around the agency and watching it for a month, and whenever Nagumo leaves, he follows him. Here, Kazamaki asks Asunaro, what does this mean? Asunaro explains to her that this is a mistake. He was watching Nagumo to wait for the right moment to introduce himself, and that he needed to discover his lifestyle patterns, and he asks them, who calls this stalking? They all answer him, we call that stalking. Here, Kazamaki gets angry, and Asunaro gets scared of her, and she tells him she will hear his excuses later. Asunaro runs, and Mashiro asks Nezo to chase him. Nagumo says that the worst stalkers don't realize they're doing it, and Asunaro remembers, and we hear him say, I guess they're right.